Our next new Amber Island wave following on from Tring is coming up, and with the reveal of what the wave after that, wave 10, is going to be as well, we have a ton to delve into today. So first of all, inside of our wave 9 teaser, we get a reveal towards Bisonorus being our next monster, and I've got to say guys, this design actually took me very much by surprise, as this one, in comparison to the rest of the redesigns that we've got, looks immensely different towards its Dawn of Fire counterpart. Now, that is obviously to be expected, I do think, seeing as though Bisonorus itself did really inhabit that Dawn of Fire style, but seeing this here is absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, we don't get a full body preview behind this monster, but I also find that to be kind of the magic behind these teasers that we've got today, as not getting a full body preview just makes it all the more cooler when they come in game, doesn't it? Along with Bisonorus, we've got Rare Snizer coming. Seeing as though Rare Snizer's not on Amber Island and it's inside of the game, it's pretty much the obvious go-to choice, and they seem to be going with the obvious ones for the next wave, as inside of the next one too, when the bushes sway away once again and the lag subsides a little bit, we see Incisaur in its full glory. Yet again, a huge redesign here. I'm absolutely loving the tongue coming out of its mouth. This appears to have a bit of a weird idle animation though. I don't know whether I'm just picking up on this because of the lag, but it seems to be very choppy. Maybe that's just because of the lag though, so don't take me on that one, although it does seem a bit kind of like Candelabra, this one. Now, going with Incisaur, seen as though Rare Tring and Rare Snizer have released now, and we have confirmation that a Rare is going to be coming with every single wave. For wave 10, we are going to be seeing a brand new Rare Fire monster come in, so make sure to hang fire, as I do think we can work out which one it is. Seen as though we've got Incisaur and Bisonorus now, that leaves not a lot behind as Amber Island waves, actually. Now we only have Dromedary left, which is our final returning monster for Amber Island, and also the 3 Quints that are left. That's only 4 monsters left until the Amber Island monsters are complete. That doesn't include a Hex monster, which I'm still including, as I'm not accepting that can't be a thing. I would love to see that. Going by this, with us only having 4 monsters left, that means we only have 4 waves left. And with these 4 waves, I'm expecting for them to release inside of Dawn of Fire the Quints too, and if this is the case, I do think that might be why the waves have been separated out like they have, and we're only getting 1 individual monster. Now, I do think it's questionable if they are going to be able to continue this monthly trend, seeing as though there's going to be 3 Quints. I'm totally expecting them to be saved for the final waves, as I've mentioned, so I think the possibility of them all being complete inside of that time period is a little ambitious, maybe, for Dawn of Fire, since we know what the schedule is like behind it. So therefore, I do think, even though the Dawn of Fire updates do have to come at the exact same time as Amber Island, as that would take away the magic from Dawn of Fire, I do expect that these waves could get delayed past Dromedary. I think it's going to be an epic finale, though, for Amber Island, with these final 3 monsters being completely brand new fire monsters, though, so it's going to be totally worth the wait. For Bisonorus, then, it's most likely going to play inside of Wallaby's verse, Bisonorus, and I'm expecting for Wallaby's verse to actually completely alternate into Bisonorus's verse. I think Bisonorus is going to become the staple name behind that one. However, something that I do want to point out, even though Bisonorus fits that Egyptian vibe behind that verse, I do want to point out that Kana's sound on Amber Island actually goes ba-ba-da-dum instead of its dum-diddly-dum that it does on pretty much every single island. This was because of Bisonorus and Wink sounds making a very similar sound, as they go dumb too, so in order to separate those sounds, they had Kana say that different sound. And seeing as though Wink inside of that verse already says dumb, it makes me think that Bisonorus could go somewhere else. But don't quote me on that, as I do think that verse does suit Bisonorus the most out of anyone, and it would come to that, but I'm going to be watching out now towards how Wink and Bisonorus go about one another. Perhaps Bisonorus' sound will end up changing. Especially, I'm going to keep this in mind, as I'm expecting for Bisonorus for there to be quite a large voice change. We know they love making voice changes on Amber Island, and I'm expecting that with Bisonorus, seeing as though Bisonorus has that deep, raspy voice, just like what Bob had, and they received an absolute whopping change, Bob, on Amber Island. If you compared those 2 sounds, I'm expecting it to be a very similar case for Bisonorus. That leaves Incisaur, who's going to be coming in wave 10. For Incisaur, I'm going to say that they're going to be like Tring, and for them to help, therefore, the transitions between the verses, which definitely do need some smoothening, as we described on our last theory video, so that the song can be a little less stuttery, so it can flow a lot better. Tring helped immense amounts with evening out the song, so that transitions between the verses are a lot more smoother. However, for Incisaur, I'm looking at them and I'm going, you still need to be this transition fixer monster, and honestly, you need to be the very savior behind these transitions, behind these verses. This monster needs needs to be the final centerpiece behind the transitions. As to me, I'm seeing it as they need to save the quints and dromedary to make the song a lot more cooler and to fill out the voids inside of the song, as there's so many blank parts inside of the song, it feels like right now. And if they don't make Incisaur that transition fixer, I'm gonna see it as, oh, they're gonna probably have to use a quint or dromedary or something, fix those verses even more, which I don't want to see. So therefore I think Incisaur has to be that monster, as this is their last chance to do that. It's most likely to play therefore inside of the beginning of Flower and Bob's verses at the very end of the song. I'm saying this because those two verses need some smoothening. So those verses absolutely need transition, seeing as though this is probably their last chance to be able to fix that. On top of that, I'm seeing at the very start of the song, Incisaur perhaps playing a very similar sound towards its Continent and Cloud Island sounds, as when Z-Grab's sound stops at the very start of the song, it's just left with a complete blank slot right there, where it just feels very blank, and then all of a sudden it goes into Kana's part once more. So perhaps Incisaur could inhabit a very similar sound to Continent and Cloud Island there to help smoothen the song there too. I'm sensing they got very experimental for Tring, and Incisaur is also that kind of monster where it has this really cool instrument, but it's often used for the transition. That they could, as the Cloud and Continent sounds are very similar, also get very experimental with this, and perhaps do an experimental sound in going into the Bob and Flower verses, as I don't sense the low-key kind of vibe with those end verses could really be captured by Incisaur's sound, with it being potentially similar to Continent and Cloud, so therefore I could sense a really large change coming there. For our next rare fire monster coming alongside Incisaur though, I have a theory behind who it could be, but first of all, we need to head on over to Monster Handler Matt for some details.
We are going to be getting a brand new fire rare with Wave 10. I will say, there is a pattern to the order in which rare fire monsters have been added in the Crucible to Amber.
So the release order behind the triples that we saw inside of Anniversary Month, excluding the double elementals, I presume, as they all released at once, do hint towards the eventual release of this rare fire monster. And apparently there's a pattern to be followed here by the release schedule. So going by the releases that we've seen thus far, we've seen every single monster who's a rare release in the individual order that they were released inside of the original game. If we take a look, all of the ones released for Fire Haven, our very first Fire Island, then Fire Oasis, the next island following on from that, and then it continued in the subsidiary release order behind the game. So going by how the monsters have all been released in their release order, we've got to trail back to the very beginning of Amber Island to our very first Amber Island monster who returned inside of the game. And if we take a look at that, who was it? It was Yelmo. So I'm expecting Rare Yelmo to be our very first new Amber Island rare arriving inside of Wave 10. If it was my guess too, I'm expecting for them to have some new headgear. That's absolutely the call-out thing that you've got to have on a rare Yelmo design, and for them to potentially, I think, make the face a little bit more visible. I was thinking about some really cool ideas behind how this monster could be really embraced, and I think seeing as though the eyes are always slotted behind that headgear, and even though it's very symbolic and a huge part of Yelmo's design, I think seeing that a little bit more inside of the rare variant and getting a glimpse at it would be a really cool idea, especially seeing as though the prismatics definitely took that in their stride, and I really like that feature behind them. I think integrating that into the new monster's design could be really cool. Whether that's a nose or some eyes dangling underneath its headgear, I would totally love to see how experimental they could get with it. I'm expecting a yellow color scheme. I don't know why, but yellow is the color that I think back to when I'm thinking about rare Yelmo. Going over to Lycoad666 on Instagram though, our wonderful Lyco, who often makes these wonderful designs. They've made an absolutely amazing design for rare Yelmo that completely captures the aesthetic that I would long to see inside of Yelmo. They've not quite integrated the facial features of what I would perhaps like to see on them, but this is a lovely tiki kind of vibe, really befitting of the fire elementals that I'm absolutely loving. If you have a look on the very top of their headgear, it got very experimental in adding the magical sigil on the very top, which is super cool. Seeing a sigil on it would be really cool. They should totally do that actually, shouldn't they? But the release of course behind these, as I haven't actually mentioned it yet, Wave 9 of course course, will be releasing when the counter strikes down to 0 this very Wednesday. For the next Amber Island wave, though, wave 10 with Incisaur. Incisaur will be arriving on the 7th of December, and our very first rare fire monster. Please let me know down below what you think about wave 10 and wave 9 of Amber Island. Are you excited for Bisonorus this Wednesday? I know I am, and I'm really excited for the potential new rare monster when that comes along. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed down below, guys, and subscribe too. I'll see you later then. Bye, guys.